Good afternoon. I'm Father David. Thank you for joining me this week for Disciple Time as we focus on the memorial or the feast day of Saint Mary Magdalene. So today we are honoring Mary Magdalene, whom the church rightly calls apostle to the apostles. And I'm really glad this feast day fell on Tuesday because I recently read Cynthia Bourgeault's book titled The Meaning of Mary Magdalene, Discover the Woman at the Heart of Christianity. And it was an awesome book for anyone who likes to contemplate the idea of single-minded devotion to God and union of relationship with God through Christ. She really opens up the mystical approach that's found actually in Mary Magdalene's gospel, which is non-canonical, but is very interesting to read if you're into contemplative Christianity or mystic writings. And it's dated back, it's one of the oldest books that we have, in fact. And so, who is Mary Magdalene, right? Well, she was the woman whom in Luke 8:2 we learn Jesus helped by casting out 7 demons from her, and scholars and mystics and philosophers all alike to weigh in on exactly what that meant. And it's an interesting concept that Cynthia Bourgeault puts forth in terms of those 7 demons and what it means to expel those. It was kind of interesting read. And besides that, though, I think one thing everybody agrees on is this, that after that happened, Mary Magdalene became a disciple of Christ, and she helped support his ministry. And she stayed by Christ's side all through his ministry, all through the crucifixion. She was there at the cross, and then she's the first person to witness the resurrected Lord. And so she was a woman of profound love, persistence, and of one who spoke about transformation through God's grace. And her story is not just a chapter in the gospel narrative. It's really like a mirror held up to our own spiritual longing. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, right? So the mystics and the saints have long paired her story with words from stuff like Song of Songs, chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, where we read this: "Oh, my bed by night, or on my bed by night, I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. I will rise now and go about the city. I will seek him whom my soul loves." And Mary's grief, really, at the empty tomb is the cry of the soul that has known divine love and will not rest until it finds the beloved again, right? So if you've ever experienced a time of profound love and profound union with God, you might be able to identify with times where you feel that and times where it feels far away. And so this might speak to you in those terms. And please understand, I'm speaking about a type of mystic unity here, okay? So her weeping outside the tomb that we read about in John chapter 11, verse 11, that weeping, it's not weakness. It is kind of like faith that's unwilling to give up. Even when the body seems lost, even when the story seems over, all right? And we're going to experience this in life. Times when the story seems over. Mary goes on. She continues in faith and in her search for Christ and union with him, right? So when the risen Christ calls her by name, saying Mary in John 20:16, it's that moment, right, where heaven touches earth. And I think for Mary Magdalene, just like that, everything is made new. Her despair of this hopeless situation is replaced with hope. And we see this kind of as Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 5:17, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he or she is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. And Mary Magdalene's transformation from sorrow to joy, from despair to mission, is the very image of resurrection as Christ's love works, I think, in the depths of our souls, renewing us, okay? And so the love of Christ controls us, Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5:14. It's not passive, it compels us, it sends us out, it gives us mission. And I think that's why Jesus doesn't let her cling to him, but instead says, go to my brothers. And he says that in John 20:17. The love of God through Christ that found her in the garden is now sending her into the world. So the idea is, don't just rest in this union. Allow this union to drive you to, love your neighbor, to care for others, to continue on in all that stuff. And so for me, as I looked at these readings with the knowledge that we're honoring Mary Magdalene, I think Mary Magdalene teaches us to seek Christ with longing, to weep when Christ seems far away, and to recognize him when he calls us by name and when he sends us to a group or gives us a purpose, right? And her love wasn't convenient. It's not minimized in the text. It didn't really wait for logic or for reason to respond. It was the kind of love that wakes up in the night to search the streets, as we read in Song Solomon, for Christ's presence. And this is the kind of love Christ, I believe, wants from us. Not faith and routine as much, a faith of routine, but one that seeks to encounter and experience Christ right here and now in those little holy moments that we've talked about. So this feast day, therefore, calls us really to seek the risen Christ in the gardens, right, of our own lives, those messy, tear-stained places, and to allow Christ to make us new right there in that rough, broken spot. And when he does, we're not to cling to him selfishly, right, but to become messengers of his resurrection and the life-giving aspects of that unity. And so, like Mary, once we are renewed, we need to go forth and say to the world, as we read in John 20:28, I have seen the Lord, and then report all that Christ has done for us. So what is our application today? It's this, I think. Yearn for Christ and seek him for renewal of spirit, and then share his love with others. I think the world could use a nice dose of human compassion and love right about now. Well, thank you for joining me as we've looked at the feast or the memorial of Saint Mary Magdalene. We'll see you next week.